The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than most cities. Its crystal walls reached so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in floating seats that moved like slow dancers in the air. The hall buzzed with voices, clicks, whistles, and sounds that human ears could never hear. Admiral Chun Vasquez stood at the center of it all. She was small compared to most beings here. Her dark blue uniform looked plain next to the shining scales and glowing bodies around her. But her eyes were hard as steel, and her voice cut through the noise like a knife. The council speaker, a being that looked like a living mountain of purple crystal, raised one massive arm. The hall fell silent. Thousands of eyes, sensors, and other things turned toward the human woman. The council recognizes Admiral Chun Vasquez of the Terran Federation, the speaker said. Its voice sounded like rocks falling down a cliff. You have requested this emergency session. Speak your words. Chun stepped forward. Her boots made small clicking sounds on the crystal floor. Each step echoed in the huge space. She looked up at the council members who sat high above her like judges. Honored council, she began. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. For 200 years, humanity has served this galaxy. We have fought your wars. We have solved your problems. We have given our lives to protect worlds we had never seen. A ripple of sound moved through the hall. Some beings made noises that sounded like laughter. Others clicked their approval. But most just listened. Chun continued. We asked to join. The inner council, you said we were too young. We asked for fair trade deals. You said we needed to prove ourselves. We asked to help make the laws that govern this galaxy. You said we did not understand the old ways. High Counselor Zexhai leaned forward in his floating throne. He looked like a giant insect made of gold and silver. His voice buzzed like a million bees. Human, your species has been part of this galaxy for barely a moment. The Zirathi have guided galactic law for 50,000 years. The Nebulans have kept the peace for even longer. You expect us to treat you as equals? We expected you to treat us as people, Chun said. Her voice got louder. But you never did. To you, we were always the new pets. The young race that needed to be told what to do. The workers who could fix anything but were never smart enough to lead. An old Nebulan drifted closer to the center of the hall. It looked like a cloud with eyes made of stars. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind. Through trees, Admiral, your people have done good work. No one denies this. But wisdom comes with age. Your species is still learning, Chun laughed. It was not a happy sound. Learning? We learned to split atoms before we could fly. We learned to heal diseases that killed billions. We learned to turn dead worlds into gardens. But somehow we never learned enough for you. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small device. It glowed with soft blue light. This galaxy has a problem with the Void Hunters in Sector 7. Your best minds have worked on it for 10 years. Last month, 3 human engineers solved it in 6 days. But when they presented their solution, they were told to give it to Zirathi, scientists who would get the credit. The hall erupted in noise. Some beings argued in languages that sounded like music. Others made sounds like breaking glass. The speaker had to call for order 3 times. When it was quiet again, Chun continued. The trade route through the spiral arm was blocked by spatial storms. Your ships could not pass. Human pilots found a way through in 2 weeks. But the Galactic Trade Commission gave the contract to Zephyrian companies anyway. A bird-like being, with 6 wings spread them wide. Human recklessness is well known, it said in a voice like singing wind. Your species takes dangerous risks. We cannot reward such behavior. Dangerous risks? Chun's voice rose again. When the plague ships came from beyond the rim, who flew straight into the infected zones. Humans, when the AI rebellion started on Kepler Station, who went in to shut down the core. Humans, when the star and the Vega system started to collapse early, who stayed behind to evacuate the last transport ships. Humans. She looked around the hall. Her eyes met the sensors and faces of beings who had made the rules she lived under for her whole life. And what did we get for all of this? Participation medals, junior status, probationary membership. Always told to wait our turn, wait to grow up, wait to be ready for real responsibility. The crystal speaker made a sound. Like grinding stone? Admiral, if your people are unhappy with their current status, perhaps they should work harder to earn advancement. That was when Chin smiled. It was a cold smile that made several nearby beings shift uncomfortably in their seats. Work harder? Counselor, last year humanity produced 47% of all new technology patents in the galaxy. We run 63% of all rescue operations. Our doctors have saved more lives than any 3 other species combined. Our engineers keep your space stations running. Our soldiers guard your borders. She paused and looked up at the highest seats where the most powerful council members sat. But we own less than 8% of all trade licenses. We hold 0 seats on the Economic Planning Board. We have never once been asked to help write galactic law, even though we follow it. Better than most species who helped create it. The hall was getting quieter now. Some beings were starting to look uncomfortable. They had heard these complaints before, but never laid out so clearly. Never said with such cold anger. Chun activated her device. A hologram appeared above her. Head, it showed star charts, population numbers, trade routes, and military positions. So we worked harder. We doubled our efforts, we tripled them. We gave everything we had to this galaxy, and what did you give us in return? She gestured to the hologram. The numbers there told a story that made several council members lean forward to look more closely. You gave us scraps, you gave us the jobs no one else wanted. You gave us praise for being good little helpers, but you never, ever gave us respect. High Counselor Zexhi's golden shell clicked with irritation. Admiral, your theatrics do not change the facts. Humanity is not ready for full council membership, perhaps in another century or 2. Chun nodded slowly. You are right, Counselor. We are not ready. She looked around the hall one more time. We are not ready to be your servants anymore. We are not ready to die for people who see us as useful animals. We are not ready to keep building your galaxy while you keep us in the basement. She reached up and unpinned something from her uniform. It was a small badge that showed her rank in the Galactic Defense Force. She held it up so everyone could see it, then let it fall. It hit the crystal floor with a tiny ringing sound that somehow seemed very loud in the huge hall. Effective immediately, the Terran Federation withdraws from all galactic treaties, trade agreements, and military alliances. We are recalling every human citizen from non-human space. We are closing our borders to all non-human traffic. We are ending all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. The noise that erupted was unlike anything the hall had ever heard. Thousands of beings shouted, clicked, buzzed, and screamed at the same time. The speaker's voice boomed over it all, calling for order. Dak Chun stood in the center of the chaos. She was calm now, like a person who had finally set down a weight she had carried too long. When the noise died down enough for her to be heard, she spoke one more time. You taught us that we were not good enough to be your equals. Thank you. For the lesson, we will not forget it. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. No one tried to stop her. No one spoke. They all just watched as humanity walked away from the galaxy that had never wanted them as partners. The great doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. In the hall, thousands of beings sat in stunned silence, not yet understanding what they had just lost. 5 years had passed since Admiral Chen Vasquez walked out of the council chambers. 5 years since humanity had vanished from galactic society like morning mist touched by sunlight. The great powers of the galaxy had expected the humans to come crawling back within months, maybe a year at most. They had been wrong. Captain Jolix of the Zirithi trade fleet stared at his navigation display with growing frustration. The holographic star map showed his usual route from the core worlds to the outer rim territories. It was a path he had flown 1,000 times before. But now, right in the middle of it, was a gray zone marked with warnings in a dozen languages. Former human space, navigation hazard, proceed with extreme caution. His crystalline fingers clicked against the control panel as he tried to plot an alternate course. Every option added weeks to his journey, some added months. The trade routes that had once flowed smoothly through human territory were now twisted paths that went the long way, around empty systems. "Captain," his navigation officer called out. She was a young Zirathi whose crystal shell still showed the blue tints of youth. "We could try the direct path. The humans have been gone for 5 years. Maybe their security systems have shut down." By now, Drolix made a sound like grinding stones. It was the Zirathi equivalent of bitter laughter. "You think so?" "Last ship that tried the direct route came back with half. Their systems fried and their crews speaking in languages that do not exist. The Galactic Patrol is still trying to figure out what happened to them." He had heard the stories. Ships that got too close to former human worlds reported strange things. Radio signals that played sounds like children singing, but when you listened carefully, the words were warnings about ancient dangers. Automated systems that spoke in dead languages, telling visitors to turn back for their own safety. Sensor readings that showed massive structures where there should be empty space, but when ships moved closer, the structures vanished like they had never been there. The worst part was the silence. Human space had once been full of chatter. Merchant. Ships calling out prices. Military patrols checking cargo manifests. Civilian transports sharing news from home. Now there was nothing. Just empty frequencies and the occasional automated message telling ships to stay away. In the capital city of the Nebulan Collective, 3 senior counselors floated in a meeting chamber that sparkled with energy fields. They looked like living clouds with eyes made of compressed starlight. Their conversation moved in currents of thought that lesser beings could never follow. The eldest among them pulsed with deep purple worry. "The agricultural sectors are failing," it said in a voice like distant thunder. "Our crystal farms cannot produce the quality we need. The yields are down 30%. "How is this possible?" asked another counselor, its form shifting from blue to silver with concern. "We have grown crystals for 1,000,000 years. Our techniques are perfect." The third counselor, younger than the others but old by any other standard, dimmed with shame. "We never grew them alone. The humans provided genetic templates. Their biological knowledge helped us design better growing mediums. Their mathematical models predicted the best harvesting times." The revelation hung in the chamber like a cold wind. None of them had realized how much they had depended on human expertise. The humans had always been quiet about their contributions, working behind the scenes, making suggestions that seemed obvious once you heard them. But now that they were gone, the gaps in galactic knowledge were showing like cracks in a broken wall. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. The Zephyrian military had discovered that their greatest strategic victories had been won using tactical algorithms secretly based on human game theory. The Vorthan shipyards found that their most efficient assembly processes had been designed by human engineers who were never given credit for their work. The Altair Banking Consortium realized that their fraud detection systems relied entirely on pattern recognition, software written by a human team that had vanished 5 years ago. But the discovery that shook the galactic powers most came from the Department of Historical Research. A Zirathi scholar named Kethran had been studying old council records when he found something that made his crystal shell crack with shock. The file was marked with highest security classifications. It contained reports about threats to galactic civilization that most council members had never heard of. The void hunters in the Magellanic Dark, the machine consciousness that slept in the dead zones between spiral arms, the plague of stars that had once consumed entire sectors before being mysteriously contained. Every single report ended the same way. Threat neutralized by Terran Federation black operations. Crisis resolved through human intervention. Danger eliminated by classified human assets. Humanity had not just been workers and soldiers. They had been the galaxy's secret guardians, fighting wars that no one else even knew were happening. They had been standing watch against nightmares while the Council dismissed them as useful pets, and now they were gone. The first sign that those ancient threats were stirring came from the Kepler sector. A research station went silent during routine observations of a dead star system. When the rescue ships arrived, they found the station intact but empty. Every computer had been wiped clean except for one message repeated in every database: the sleepers wake. Within weeks, similar incidents were reported across the outer rim. Ships disappeared without sending distress signals. Colonies reported strange dreams that spread from person to person like a disease. Ancient derelict vessels, dead for millennia, suddenly began broadcasting signals toward unknown destinations. The council convened emergency sessions, but their responses were slow and confused. The bureaucrats who had built their careers on following procedure found themselves facing problems that had no procedures. The military commanders who had always relied on superior technology discovered that some enemies could not be fought with conventional weapons. High Counselor HFY stood before the assembled council 5 years and 4 months after humanity's departure. His golden shell had lost its luster, and his voice carried none of its old arrogance. "The situation in the outer sectors continues to deteriorate," he reported. "We have lost contact with 17 research stations, 4 mining colonies, and 2 military outposts. The patterns match historical records of previous crisis events, but our analysts cannot determine the source of the threat." The Nebulan representative drifted forward, its form flickering with anxiety. "What do our human experts recommend?" it asked, then stopped. The silence that followed was like a physical weight in the chamber. There were no human experts. There were no human analysts. There were no human soldiers who specialized in fighting impossible enemies. The council had spent so long taking human help for granted that they had forgotten it was there until it was gone. "Perhaps," suggested a small voice from the back of the chamber, "we should try to contact the Terran Federation. Request their assistance." The suggestion was met with uncomfortable silence. Several council members shifted in their seats. The pride that had led them to dismiss humanity now prevented them from admitting they needed help. Zexai cleared his throat with a sound like metal scraping stone. "The humans made their position clear 5 years ago. They have severed all diplomatic ties. They do not respond to our communications." "Have we actually tried?" asked the same small voice. Another uncomfortable silence. The truth was that the council had sent several messages to human space over the years. They had started as formal, diplomatic inquiries, then became increasingly desperate pleas for trade resumption, and finally had devolved into barely disguised begging for help. None had received any response except automated acknowledgments that seemed more like insults than communications, but the galaxy's problems were getting worse, and everyone knew it. Trade routes were failing as ships avoided the mysterious dangers. Informally human-protected space. Economic growth had stalled without human innovation. Several minor species that had been under council protection had simply vanished, leaving behind only brief messages about choosing a different path. The worst part was the growing realization that humanity had not just been contributing to galactic civilization. They had been holding it together. They had been the glue that made the whole system work, and without them, everything was slowly falling apart. As the council session dragged on with no solutions and no hope, one thought echoed in every mind. Present, what had they done? And more importantly, was it too late to undo it? The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the value of those they had cast aside. But the teachers were gone, and the students were failing the test. The first world to die was Ketha Prime, a Zephyrian agricultural planet that fed 12 systems. It happened on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. The population was going about their normal business when every piece of technology on the planet suddenly stopped working. Not broken, not damaged, just stopped. As if something had reached into every circuit and told it to sleep, the orbital defense platforms went dark. The communication arrays fell silent. Even simple tools like farming equipment and medical scanners became useless chunks of metal and plastic. Within hours, the planet was cut off from the galaxy, helpless and alone. That was when the ships appeared. They came from empty space, vessels that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Their hulls moved like living skin, and they gave off no heat signatures, no energy readings, no indication they were machines at all. The Galactic Defense Force had no name for them, so they called them ghost ships. The ghost ships did not attack. They simply landed and began to change things. Plants withered and died, then grew back as something else. Animals fled to the mountains and never came down. The very air began to taste different, charged with energies that made people sick. By the time rescue ships arrived 3 days later, Ketha Prem was no longer a world that could support galactic life. The ghost ships had vanished, but they had left behind a planet that belonged to something else now. The evacuation took weeks, and many of the survivors never recovered from what they had seen. The attack patterns matched nothing in galactic military databases. But when desperate council researchers dug through old human archives that had been left behind, they found references to something called the machine consciousness. Ancient reports spoke of a collective intelligence that existed in the spaces between realities, something that had tried to remake the galaxy according to its own design. Millennia ago, the reports all ended the same way. Threat contained by Terran Black Ops Division, recommend continued monitoring. There was no Terran Black Ops Division anymore. There was no continued monitoring. The Watchers had walked away, and the things they had been watching were waking up. General Krex of the Zirathi Defense Corps stood in the command center of the battle station Eternal Guard, staring at tactical displays that made no sense. Red warning lights marked 17 systems where ghost ship attacks had been reported. Yellow caution markers showed 30 more systems with unexplained equipment failures and strange energy readings. General, his intelligence officer called. Out, her crystal shell flickering with stress patterns. We are receiving reports from the Vorthan sector. An entire mining fleet has gone missing. The last transmission was crew members reporting that their computer systems were displaying equations they could not understand. Krex made a grinding sound deep in his throat, the same equations found on the derelict ships in the Altair system. Yes, sir. And the research station near the galactic rim sent a partial message before going silent. They said something about mathematical proofs that rewrote reality. The general turned to look at his staff officers. They were all experienced military personnel who had fought in a dozen campaigns, but their crystal shells showed the stress colors of raw recruits facing their first battle. They were fighting an enemy that made no sense, using weapons they did not understand, following strategies that seemed to come from nightmares. Have we heard anything from the humans? He asked quietly. The communications officer shook her head. No response to any of our messages, sir. Their space remains completely silent. Krex had been one of the few Zirathi who had respected human military capabilities. He had worked with Admiral Vasquez on 3 joint operations and had been impressed by the humans' ability to find solutions that no one else could see. He had also been one of the few who had argued against dismissing them from the Inner Council. Now, he wondered if humanity had known this day would come. If they had been preparing for threats that the rest of the galaxy refused to acknowledge. If their withdrawal had not been anger but strategic planning, the thought made his crystal shell go cold. On the other side of the galaxy, in the floating cities of the Nebulan Collective, Senior Counselor Vithara drifted through archives that stretched back 1,000,000 years. She was looking for answers, for some clue about how their ancestors had dealt with these ancient threats. What she found, instead, was a pattern that made her existence flicker with shock. Every few thousand years, the record showed periods of crisis, times when unknown enemies emerged from the dark spaces to threaten galactic civilization. And every time the threats had been defeated by species that seemed to appear from nowhere, fight impossible battles and then fade back into obscurity. The builders who had fought the entropy wars 50,000 years ago. The wanderers who had stopped the star plague 30 millennia past. The guardians who had contained the void singers just 10,000 years before the humans arrived. Each time, these mysterious defenders had been dismissed by the major galactic powers as primitive, young, unworthy of respect. Each time they had been excluded from the councils of the great and powerful, and each time they had eventually withdrawn from galactic society, leaving behind only ruins and legends. Vithara realized with growing horror that humanity might not have been the first species to walk this path. They might have been the latest in a long line of guardian races that the galaxy had used and discarded. And now, like all the others, they were gone when they were needed most. The pattern was clear in the historical records once you knew how to look for it. The galaxy had a habit of creating its own protectors and then driving them away through arrogance and pride. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, the situation was getting worse by the day. The ghost ships were no longer content to strike isolated worlds. They had begun coordinating their attacks, hitting multiple systems simultaneously in patterns that suggested intelligence and planning. Worse still, other things were stirring in the dark. Long-range sensors detected massive structures moving in the void between galaxies, shapes so large they defied comprehension. Ancient weapons platforms, dormant for millions of years, were powering up in dead systems. And from the galactic core came reports of something that made hardened soldiers weep just to look at it. The plague of stars was returning. Captain Yorth of the Altair Patrol had been one of the first to encounter it. His ship had been investigating strange energy readings near an ancient battleground when they found it, a single star that burned with colors that should not exist. Looking at it through the ship's sensors had driven 3 crew members insane and left the others with nightmares that would not stop. "It is not a star anymore," he reported to his superiors, his voice shaking. "It is something wearing a star's shape. And it is singing. The song gets into your head and changes how you think." My ship's computer started rewriting its own code. After we scanned it for 30 seconds, the Altair High Command had classified the report immediately and ordered the system quarantined. But they knew it was too late. If the plague of stars was active again, it would spread from system to system until it had consumed everything. The historical records spoke of entire galactic arms being infected before it could be stopped. The last time it had appeared, the record simply stated, "Crisis resolved through unknown intervention. Recommend immediate contact with Terran Federation for consultation." The reports had been written 3 years before humanity withdrew from galactic society. In the council chambers, emergency sessions ran day and night. The great powers of the galaxy argued and debated while their civilization crumbled around them. Some wanted to try diplomatic contact with the attackers. Others pushed for massive military campaigns against enemies they could not understand. A few suggested fleeing to other galaxies entirely. High Counselor Zexai had aged decades in the past few months. His golden shell was cracked with stress fractures, and his voice carried none of its old authority. "The economic projections are catastrophic," he announced to the assembled council. "Trade has dropped 70%. 16 member species have declared independence from the council. Our military forces are stretched beyond breaking point." "What about the research into these new weapons?" asked the Vorthan representative. "Surely our best scientists can find a solution." The science director, an elderly Nebulan whose form flickered with exhaustion, drifted forward. "Our researchers cannot even understand what they are fighting. The ghost ships use technology that appears to violate fundamental laws of physics. The plague of stars operates on principles that drive our computers insane when they try to process the data. And now we have reports of time distortions around some of the affected systems." "Time distortions?" Several council members spoke at once. "Ships arriving at their destinations before they departed. Messages being received days before they were sent. Cause and effect breaking down in localized areas." The science director paused, its form dimming with despair. "We are not fighting an invasion. We are fighting the breakdown of reality itself." The chamber fell into silence. Outside the great windows, the capital city continued its daily routine. But even here at the heart of galactic power, the signs of decay were visible. Ships landing less frequently. Trade delegations canceled. Embassy staff recalled to the first deep space reconnaissance. Mission into former human territory was approved after the council lost 3 more core worlds in a single week. General Krex volunteered to lead it personally, bringing with him a hand-picked crew of the galaxy's best scouts and scientists. They departed from the Eternal Guard Station on a ship equipped with every sensor array the Galactic Defense Force could provide. Their destination was the Alpha Centauri system, one of humanity's oldest colonies. The last communication from there had been 8 years ago, just before the humans began their withdrawal. According to old records, it had been home to nearly 50 million people and served as a major manufacturing hub for human technology. The journey took 3 weeks through the twisted hyperspace routes that avoided the growing danger zones. As they approached the edge of what had once been human space, strange things began to happen. The ship's computers started displaying information in languages that did not exist in any database. Sensor readings showed impossible energy signatures that changed when no one was looking at them. Crew members reported dreams that felt more real than waking life. Commander Theises, a Nebulan scientist who specialized in exotic physics, was the first to notice the changes in space itself. "General," she called out, her form flickering with excitement and fear, "the quantum substrate is different here. The basic rules of physics are operating under modified parameters." "Explain that." "In words a soldier can understand," Krex replied, his crystal shell displaying stress patterns. "Reality is more flexible here. Things that should be impossible are merely difficult. It is as if someone has rewritten the fundamental laws that govern this region of space." The ship's navigation officer, a young Zirathi named Keth, looked up from his console with confusion. "Sir, I am reading stellar positions that do not match our charts. The stars have moved." "Moved how?" "Into geometric patterns. Perfect mathematical arrangements that could not occur naturally. And, sir, I am detecting gravitational signatures from objects that are not showing up on visual scans." Krex ordered the ship to drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Alpha Centauri system. What they found there defied every expectation and challenged their understanding of what was possible. Alpha Centauri N-B, the twin stars that had once provided light and heat to human colonies, were still there. But they had been transformed into something that hurt to look at directly. The stars pulsed in perfect synchronization, their light carrying information patterns that made the ship's computers overheat when they tried to decode them. Around the stars, where planets had once orbited, were structures that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. They appeared as rings of crystallized space-time, each one the size of a small moon but containing the mass of an entire planet. Energy flowed between them in streams of pure mathematics, equations that rewrote themselves as the observers watched. "How is this possible?" Commander Theises whispered, her form dim with awe. "These structures violate everything we know about engineering and physics." "Human engineering," corrected the ship's database specialist, a quiet Vorthan named Melox. "I have been analyzing the energy patterns. The mathematical signatures match theoretical work published by human scientists decades ago, theories that our experts dismissed as impossible fantasy." The reconnaissance team spent hours trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The structures around Alpha Centauri were clearly artificial, but they operated on principles that current galactic science said were impossible. They seemed to harvest energy directly from the quantum foam that underlied reality itself, storing it in forms that existed partially outside normal space-time. Even more disturbing were the signs of activity. Ships moved between the structures, but they were unlike any vessels in galactic databases. They appeared to be grown rather than built, their hulls shifting and flowing like living tissue. Some were the size of small asteroids, others no bigger than fighters, but all of them moved with impossible precision and speed. "Are those human ships?" Kef asked, staring at the display. "I do not know," Krex admitted. "Send a standard first contact. Greeting. Let us see if anyone answers." The response came immediately, but not through their communications array. Instead, words appeared directly in their minds, spoken in perfect galactic standard, but carrying undertones that suggested vast intelligence and barely contained power. Galactic Council Vessel Seeker, you are observed. State your purpose in this system. The crew looked at each other in shock. Telepathic communication was considered impossible by most galactic species. Only the ancient Nebulans had limited mental abilities and nothing like this direct mind-to-mind contact. Krex gathered his courage and spoke aloud, hoping the voice would hear him. This is General Krex of the Zirathi Defense Corps. We are seeking contact with human authorities. The galaxy faces threats that require urgent consultation. Silence stretched for long minutes. Then the voice returned, and this time they could sense amusement beneath the words, human authorities. How quaint. There are no authorities here, General Krex. There are only those who have chosen to grow beyond the limitations you mistake for laws. We need to speak with someone in charge. Krex insisted. Ancient enemies have returned. The galaxy is in danger. The galaxy has always been in danger, the voice replied. The difference is that some of us finally decided to do something permanent about it. Before anyone could respond, their ship was surrounded by a gentle light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They felt themselves being moved, not through space but through dimensions that had no names. When the sensation stopped, they found themselves inside one of the impossible structures. The interior defied description. Corridors curved through spaces that were bigger inside than outside. Gravity seemed to be a suggestion rather than a law, allowing crew members to walk on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. The walls themselves were transparent, showing views of stellar engineering projects that spanned light years. They were met by figures that might once have been human. They walked upright and had recognizable features, but their skin seemed to contain starlight, and their eyes held depths that suggested they were looking at reality from angles the visitors could not imagine. When they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that made the listeners think of cosmic music. "Welcome to what your records call Alpha Centauri," said their guide, a being who introduced herself as Elena. "Though we have moved somewhat beyond the need for such limited designations. What happened to humanity?" Commander Thyses asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Elena smiled, and her expression held both sadness and infinite patience. "We grew up. Your council spent so much time telling us we were not ready, not advanced enough, not worthy of respect. So we decided to become something that could not be dismissed or ignored." She led them through corridors filled with impossible sights, gardens where flowers bloomed in 11 dimensions, workshops where beings crafted tools from crystallized time, libraries where knowledge was stored as living thoughts that could be experienced rather than read. "This transformation," Melox asked, "how long did it take?" "Time is more flexible than you imagine," Elena replied. "We have been working on this project for decades from your perspective. From ours it has been centuries of careful development and testing." They entered a vast chamber where beings worked with energies that had no names in galactic languages. The air hummed with power that made reality shimmer at the edges. In the center of the room was a display showing the entire galaxy with red zones marking the areas under attack by ancient enemies. "You see our work," Elena said, gesturing to the display. "For years we fought these threats using conventional methods. We bled and died to protect worlds that considered us useful servants, but conventional methods only delay the inevitable. These enemies are older than your civilizations, more patient than your governments, and they will always return." "Then, how do you propose to stop them?" Krex asked. Elena's smile became something that contained both promise and warning. "By changing the rules they depend on, by rewriting the fundamental laws that allow them to exist, by becoming something greater than the sum of our limitations." She touched the display and the view zoomed in on the areas under attack. But now the reconnaissance team could see things their sensors had missed. Streams of energy flowing out from human space, surrounding the danger zones, containing them. Mathematical constructs that existed in 12 dimensions, working to unravel the attacking forces at their most basic level. "You are fighting them?" Thyses breathed. "We are erasing them," Elena corrected. "Removing them from the equation of existence itself." But the work is delicate and requires absolute precision. Interference from conventional forces could disrupt the process and make things infinitely worse. She turned to face the visitors, and they could see stars being born and dying in the depths of her eyes. Your council has sent ships to request our aid. They promise recognition, respect, equal treatment. They offer us everything we once wanted when we were still small enough to want such things. And will you help us? Krex asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. Elena's expression became infinitely sad. General, we are helping you. We. The council chambers had never seen such chaos. Representatives from across the galaxy shouted, clicked, and buzzed at each other in languages that turned the air thick with confusion. Some demanded immediate military action against the transformed humans. Others called for complete surrender to whatever humanity had become. A few simply wept, their species equivalent of tears falling like rain on the crystal floor. High Counselor HFY stood at the center of it all, his golden shell cracked with stress fractures that would never heal. The report from General Krex's reconnaissance mission lay before him like a death sentence. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had become something that made the ancient powers of the galaxy look like children playing with toys. Order! HFY called out, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. We must decide our course of action. What action? Screamed a Vorthan delegate, his tentacles writhing with panic. They can rewrite the laws of physics? They speak directly into our minds. They have turned stars into tools and space itself into their workshop. A Nebulan counselor drifted forward, her form dim with despair. Perhaps we should be grateful. They remember us at all. The reconnaissance team reported that they are still fighting the ancient threats. We should thank whatever remains of their mercy that they have not simply allowed the galaxy to burn. Mercy? HFY's shell flared with indignation. We are the Galactic Council. We have governed this galaxy for 1,000,000 years. We do not beg for mercy from upstart mammals who think they have grown beyond their place. The chamber fell silent at his words. Every being present could hear the fear behind his anger, the desperate denial of someone watching their world crumble around them. For a long moment no one spoke. Then a small voice came from the junior delegate section. It belonged to Cass, a young Zerathi who had only recently earned her position. High Counselor, with respect, what if they were right? Right about what? HFY turned toward her, his voice dangerous. Cass's crystal shell flickered with nervousness. But she continued. What if we were the ones who did not understand our place? What if we were the children and they were trying to protect us from threats we could not even imagine? Impossible, HFY snapped. We are the inheritors of ancient wisdom. We have guided galactic civilizations since before their species learned to use fire. And yet, Cass said quietly, they are the ones who have become something greater. They are the ones fighting battles we cannot even understand. They are the ones who have transcended the limitations we told them they could never overcome. Her words hung in the air like an accusation. Around the chamber, other young delegates began to nod. They were the ones who would inherit the galaxy that was left behind, assuming there was still a galaxy to inherit. As the debate raged on, reports continued to stream in from across galactic space. The ancient threats were being systematically neutralized, but not by any military force the Council could recognize. Ghost ships simply stopped functioning, their reality warping abilities canceled by mathematics that rewrote their existence. The plague of stars was being contained by barriers made of crystallized space-time that prevented its spread. Even the machine consciousness seemed to be retreating from regions where human influence was strongest. But with each victory, the galaxy itself was changing. Trade routes that had existed for millennia were becoming obsolete as space itself was restructured for greater efficiency. Planets that had been considered uninhabitable were becoming garden worlds overnight as fundamental constants were adjusted. Species that had never been able to communicate were suddenly finding their thoughts synchronized through networks of quantum entanglement. It was salvation. But it was salvation on humanity's terms. The galaxy that emerged from this transformation would be unrecognizable to those who had governed it before. 3 days after General Krex's report reached the Council, they made their decision. A delegation would travel to the Sol system itself, to Earth, humanity's birthworld. They would make a formal request for audience with whatever humanity had become. They would offer anything, promise everything, beg, if necessary, for some form of cooperation that would allow galactic civilization to survive. The delegation consisted of 5 beings: High Counselor Zexhai representing the Zirathi, Elder Vithara of the Nebulans, War Leader Thyman of the Zephyrians, Trademaster Gorlix of the Vorthans, and, at her own insistence, young Delegate Cass. They traveled in the Council's most advanced diplomatic vessel, equipped with every ceremonial honor and gift the galaxy's treasury could provide. The journey to Sol took 2 weeks. As they traveled deeper into what had once been human space, the changes became more dramatic. Stars moved in their paths to create perfect geometric patterns. Planets showed signs of impossible engineering projects. Space itself seemed more alive, more responsive to thought and intention. When they finally reached the edge of the Sol system, they found something that stopped their ship dead in its tracks. Earth was still there, but it was no longer a planet in any conventional sense. It had become something that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, its surface showing views of landscapes that spanned multiple universes. The moon had been transformed into a crystalline structure that seemed to be processing the quantum foam that filled empty space around Earth. They could see the infrastructure of a civilization that had grown beyond the need for ships or stations. Beings of living light moved through vacuum as easily as others walked through air. Structures that looked like frozen music spanned the distance between worlds. And at the center of it all was Earth itself, radiating intelligence and purpose. Like a living god, their ship was brought to a gentle stop by forces they could not detect or measure. A voice spoke to them, not through their communications array but directly into their consciousness. It was a collective voice speaking as one mind composed of billions of human souls. "Counselors of the Galactic Alliance," the voice said, carrying infinite patience and equally infinite sadness. "You have come far to reach us. State your purpose." Zexhai stood and attempted to project the dignity he had once commanded so easily. "We come to request a formal audience. The galaxy faces extinction, and we seek an alliance with the Terran Federation." Gentle laughter filled their minds, not mocking but filled with the kind of sadness that comes from watching children repeat the same mistakes. "There is no Terran Federation, Counselor. There is no Earth government to negotiate with. We are no longer the species you once knew." "Then what are you?" asked Elder Vithara, her form flickering with genuine curiosity. "We are what you could have been," the voice replied. "We are what any species becomes when they stop accepting limitations and start embracing possibilities. We are humanity grown beyond the boundaries of flesh, thought, and reality itself." The delegation was transported, not through space but through dimensions they had no names for, until they found themselves standing in a place that might have been a park, a library, a temple, or all 3 at once. Around them, beings who had once been human moved with the casual grace of those who had transcended physical law. Children played games that involved creating miniature universes. Artists painted with colors that existed only in mathematics. Scientists conducted experiments with the fundamental forces that shaped reality. At the center of this impossible place stood a figure that still retained recognizably human features. She was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to contain starlight and eyes that held the depth of eternity. When she smiled, they could see the ghosts of every human who had ever lived and died and been reborn into something greater. "I am what Elena has become," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made reality shimmer. "I speak for the collective that was once humanity, though we are so much more now." "Our galaxy is dying," Zexhai said, his pride finally breaking under the weight of desperation. "The threats you once fought in secret have returned, our civilizations are crumbling, our people are suffering. We come to beg for your help." Elena nodded slowly. "We know. We have been fighting those battles for you since the day we left. The galaxy is safer now than it has been in 1,000,000 years. Then return to us, pleaded Elder Vathara. Help us rebuild. Teach us what you have learned? We cannot return to what we were, Elena said gently. That would be like asking a butterfly to become a caterpillar again. The transformation is complete and irreversible. Then what happens to us? Asked young Cass, speaking for the first time since they had arrived. Elena turned to her, and for a moment her expression held infinite compassion. You will do what all children do when they grow up. You will learn to take care of yourselves. The ancient threats are contained. The galaxy is stable. What you build from here will be your choice to make. But without your guidance, without your protection, ... You will find your own way, Elena interrupted. You will make your own mistakes and discover your own solutions. You will grow into something we cannot predict or control. And that is as it should be. The delegation found themselves back on their ship, floating in space near Earth, but now they could see streams of energy flowing out from the transformed world, reaching to every corner of the galaxy, healing wounds in space-time, stabilizing regions that had been damaged by